This is the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Then Jesus said to the disciples, "There was a rich man who had a manager, and charges were brought to him that this manager was squandering his property. So he summoned him and said to him, 'What is this that I hear about you? Give me an account of your management, because you cannot be my manager any longer.' Then the manager said to himself, 'What will I do now that my master is taking the position away from me? I am not strong enough to dig, and I am ashamed to beg. I have decided what to do, so that when I am dismissed as manager, people may welcome me into their homes.' So summoning his master's debtors, one by one, he asked the first, 'How much do you owe my master?' He answered, 100 jugs of olive oil.' He said to him, 'Take your bill, sit down quickly, and make it 50. Then he asked another, 'And how much do you owe?' He replied, 100 containers of wheat. He said to him, 'Take your bill and make it 80. And his master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the children of this age are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than are the children of light. And I tell you, make friends for yourself by means of dishonest wealth, so that when it is gone, they may welcome you into the eternal homes. Whoever is faithful in a very little is faithful also in much. And whoever is dishonest in a very little is dishonest also in much. If then you have not been faithful with the dishonest wealth, who will entrust to you the true riches? And if you have not been faithful with what belongs to another, who will give you what is your own? No slave can serve two masters, for a slave will either hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. Well, the first thing to say about this passage from Luke chapter 16 is that it doesn't make much sense. It's bizarre and it's confusing. I figure I could stand up here and try to explain it in some sort of way, but in the end, I think I might just end up making myself more confused. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to focus on the first sentence and the last sentence. You know, that trick you used when you had to read a book when you were in school. The first sentence and the last sentence. The first sentence is this. Jesus said to the disciples, "There was a rich man who had a manager, and charges were brought to him that this man was squandering his property." There was a rich man who had a manager. What's a manager? Well, a manager is someone who takes care of things on behalf of another. Another word we use sometimes for that, another definition, is a steward. Stewards manage the money or the property of someone else. They don't own the things. They are just supposed to be taking care of them well. Need an image, maybe, of what this role, this job of steward is like? Okay. Every summer, my family goes to the mountains up near Blowing Rock, North Carolina. There are lots of things we like to do while we're on vacation there, but one of our favorite things to do is to play in a mountain stream. There's a spot where we always go several times during our getaway. We call it the creek, but it's just a creek. But it's become our spot, this cold mountain stream nestled on the edge of a picnic area. We do all kinds of things to relax and play in this stream, including shifting the rocks around to make little waterfalls and twists and turns for the lazy current. We'll spend hours moving large stones and small stones, creating our own wonderful world there. And then, at the end of the day, we will walk away and leave it all behind. Why do you think we are able to walk away and leave all this work behind? Well, it's because we know that it doesn't belong to us. The rocks were tools to work with, to manage for a little while. We had an effect on the water. We directed it in different directions, but it wasn't our water, and they weren't our stones. We were just stewards of these things for a short time. The next day, some other family would come and use these things, and the next another, and on until we are back for another summer. It wouldn't work to try to take the rocks and keep them for ourselves. Believe me, we tried once. We've got one in our garage. We've been hauling around for years. It wouldn't make any sense to try and get the water and say, "It's mine." The water would just slip through our fingers and continue on downstream. As stewards, all we can do is use what is placed in our hands while it's there. That's true of mountain stones and streams. And that's true about all the gifts that are placed into our hands. When we hear a story in the Gospels about a man who had a manager, a steward, there's a pretty good chance it's going to be a story that reminds us that we are stewards, just managers of the gifts God places in our hands. Now, God places some amazing gifts in our hands: land, the beauties of creation, possessions to keep us fed and safe, money to share, tools to use for our labor, inheritance passed on by those before us. But you see, these gifts are just ours to use and manage for a short time. Our human nature, our need for security, our desire to accumulate makes us want to keep these possessions for ourselves, want to try to get stuff and say, "It's mine." But God is just going to keep on telling us, "Hey, you're stewards. Don't be foolish with. Don't squander the gifts I am giving you. Manage them faithfully." You know what's been a really fun recent example of that is the guy who made the college game day sign last Saturday asking for beer money. Did you see this story? There's a guy named Carson King, and he made a poster that said, "Bush Light supply needs replenished. Venmo me at Carson King 25. He held out that sign on the background of ESPN's pregame show in Iowa, half joking, half hoping maybe he'd get a few bucks sent to him. To his surprise, he started getting lots of donations. After the amount got up into the hundreds, he decided to redirect his cause. So he announced on social media that he was going to give all the donations to a children's hospital in Iowa. Then the funds really started coming in, including matching donations from Anheuser-Busch and Venmo itself. As of yesterday, he'd received more than $800,000. It's a pretty amazing story, isn't it? Here's this guy, this steward, and into his hands get placed all this. And he's just going to let it flow through him on downstream to others. In the last sentence of our gospel story, Jesus says, You cannot serve God and wealth. You cannot serve God and wealth. I don't know why Jesus says such challenging, controversial things. But it's probably because he knows we need to hear it. We need to be reminded over and over again that we have a Lord, a Master, who fills our lives with riches, which are our duty and delight to manage well. But in the end, we don't worship the riches. We worship the Lord. Amen.